Welcome to Brain Friends, where two neuro nerds talk all things aphasia, language recovery, culture, and community. I am Dr. Davetrina Seles Gadson, a clinical speech-language pathologist and neuroscientist.
And I am Angie Cauthorn, stroke survivor and aphasia advocate.
Welcome to our show.
Welcome to Brain Friends.
We want to thank all of our listeners for downloading the podcast. We appreciate everyone listening, so please tell a friend to tell a friend that we are here.
And we are.
Hey, Angie.
Dr. Celeste, what is going on? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am blessed and highly favored. I'm doing good. Just out here enjoying the sunshine on this fine day. What is cracking with you?
Nothing much, man. Same old, same old. Excited for this episode of Brain Friends, where we are going to talk about primary progressive aphasia.
Okay.
Hot topic.
Yes. It's been we just had to hop on the mic real quick and talk about the differences of the frontal lobe and primary progressive aphasia versus a different type of aphasia. But we did aphasia types, but this is going to be a little bit different in the way that we're going to really just dig in on PPA today.
Yeah.
All right.
But we got to get to our icebreaker, honey, because we know the people do not play about the icebreaker.
So about the icebreaker, where are we going? What are we going to do?
So what would you title your autobiography?
If I had an autobiography,
yeah,
I would name it Same Me, New Mission.
Ooh, Same Me, New Mission.
Yeah, because I am still me at my core.
Yeah.
There is a new me. There is a change that's happened. There are things that are different, but at my core, I'm still me. But now I'm on a new mission.
Yeah.
And that mission is the advocacy of aphasia, the advocacy of stroke, and just brain health as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the new me, and it'll be about strength, resilience, and being a champion.
Yeah.
And being a winner.
I think that's something we should all think about, really. Like, what is our autobiography?
I love that. What about you?
I would name mine The Power of No.
Explain.
So I feel like a lot of the accomplishments that I've had in life have happened because someone told me no. And when you tell me no, it drives me even more to want to do it. And so I think that is one space of it. But then the other space is I'm at a stage in my life to where I'm also learning that no is a complete sentence. That you don't have to, look, honey, either I can or I can't. Okay? And I don't have to give you a reason, an excuse.
Right.
If I don't want to go, if I don't want to do it, like no is a complete sentence.
It is.
So I think that's one of the things that word no helped me throughout my career and schooling, and now in this new stage, just helping me kind of like rediscover myself in a different way and be okay with it.
And that's how you got into research, because you wanted to know about how these things were affecting the Black community, and they told you couldn't do that because it didn't exist, and you were like, okay.
Watch and she did it.
And then here we go. And who's holding the pen? And who's got that pen?
Exactly. And they said no. Like I remember wanting to do my dissertation research initially on the topic that I was able to do it on. And at first they were like, well, you need a better reason. Not just because it's your community.
That's not good enough.
And I think it was just that thing of no. Even back as a kid, my mom would tell me if they told me no, then I'd be like, okay, well, let me try to figure out how to do it anyway.
Right. Okay. Which was actually considered mischievous then, but now it's got you on top. So
It made me a
okay.
doctor.
Call me Dr. Celeste. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is too much. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we talking about today?
So primary progressive aphasia is pretty much a hot topic right now. You know, in some of our episodes before, we've talked about how aphasia is not known by everybody. And recently, a while back, we know that Bruce Willis was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia or PPA. And most recently, Wendy Williams
Yep.
has, her team said that she has been diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia and frontal temporal dementia.
I have so many questions about it. I guess my first question would be, what does the frontal lobe do? Like, what does the frontal lobe control?
Yeah. Well, so the frontal lobe controls a lot of things, and, you know, it's going to be responsible for attention, personality changes, verbal expression, emotion, spontaneity, problem solving. Like, that's the lobe that we go
Wow.
to for so many things. And then
Right.
if we think about the temporal lobe, you know, you may have increased aggressive behavior. We know that the temporal lobe is our listening lobe. So an individual might have difficulty understanding spoken words or attention, memory loss, persistent talking. So just kind of like, you know, talking with
Mm-hmm.
that may be uninhibited. And so those two lobes together can create challenges, honestly.
No, a whole avalanche of nonsense
There you
of
go.
just not be of being misunderstood and misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like the same things that you experience with a stroke of those. So even though you may have, well, I guess that would be my next question then.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between the onset
Mm-hmm.
of of PPA, of a primary progressive aphasia, versus a stroke? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
there? I know there's a difference, but in the difference of the onset, how does that affect long term? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when we think about a stroke, that's going to be that acute occurrence that's happening. And so oftentimes with a stroke, the damage is also going to be more focal, like so to whatever part of the brain lost the blood supply to cause the damage. But when we think about PPA that could be associated with the frontal temporal dementia, we're thinking about a progressive neurodegenerative disease. And so the changes are going to be slow to onset. It's not just going to happen like that. They may increase gradually,
Mm-hmm.
but the change of it's going to be different. And then also, it can be more widespread. So you might not just have that one little area that has the damage of loss of where the blood supply was lost,
Mm-hmm.
with the degenerative nature that occurs with PPA. The loss can occur throughout the different lobes, which makes therapy a little bit more challenging, and
Hmm.
recovery, because it's going to continue to progress, versus the
Okay.
stroke, you're going to have more of a recovery.
Okay. So to make sure I understand you, with a stroke, because it's a sudden onset, so it's almost like an attack or like a bruise, and that bruise will actually get better over time. Won't be as widespread, or it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Versus PPA, it comes on slow. It's not a hit and a bruise. It's more like it's a pebble in the water and it just spreads out and
Yeah.
gets worse and worse.
Right.
And
Right.
it doesn't have a way to it's not like once the bleeding stopped after a stroke, the stroke is over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Versus PPA, that type of issue, it's actually getting worse, progressively worse. And so what's it called? Retirement. No, to get better is our recovery track
Mm-hmm.
is night and day. But the fact that there is no cure for aphasia in either realm, it's just about the therapy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the other thing to make sure that we differentiate is aphasia is the symptom of what's happening in the brain. So aphasia is the symptom of the stroke. PPA is the symptom of that frontal temporal dementia, or if it's Alzheimer's or Pick's disease. When we think about PPA is a result of some type of neurodegenerative disease that's occurring in the brain versus your regular aphasia is often a result of that acute onset of a change. So whether it's a stroke, traumatic brain injury, brain tumor, but it's acute. So it's not necessarily going to continue to get worse. You may have the ability to get better, especially because of neuroplasticity.
So neuroplasticity may not be coming to save you in the same way with PPA.
Right, right. Because of the degenerative nature of it. So it's only going
Ah,
to continue to get worse, unfortunately. It's because it's progressive.
right. So this, I got it. So when we were talking about neuroplasticity before, you were saying it's like being in traffic, and then your brain will kind of find a different way to get to the information, like a detour.
Mm-hmm.
What we're finding with BPA, if I understand you correctly, these roads are all washed out, and they're getting more washed out by the hour or the certain amount of time.
It's going to be a
So
gradual, progressive
aggressive,
nature.
and so it's I really am kind of stuck just in this water that I can't get around, or this traffic, and things around me are deteriorating to the point where I can't get to the main road, where with
Mm-hmm.
stroke onset, I may be able to have some neuroplasticity that can build me a detour around the part that has been damaged, because that part is stagnant and it's not growing more, but versus the other one is growing more.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's taking up more and more space, encroaching upon the good part of the brain, versus a stroke onset is stagnant. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
Look at me.
even if we think about
You
like
see me.
aphasia, even if we think about aphasia, one of the things that we're able to do in individuals that have aphasia, because again, we're talking about aphasia, because PPA is a type of aphasia. The difference comes into play how you get your aphasia, if that
Right.
makes sense. So if you get your aphasia because of that acute, one-time incident that happened, you have the ability to use some of your other lobes and some of those other areas that are stronger to help you get better. But if you
Right.
get your aphasia like a PPA, which is going to be progressive in nature, you might have something and then you don't have it. And getting it back is going, you're not going to be able to get it back because of the degenerative nature. And so
the
that
progressive
disease, the
the
progressive nature.
progressive
Yep.
nature, and which is
Mm-hmm.
it's in the name.
It's in the
It's
name.
progressing.
Yep, it's progressing. Yep, yep.
Are there any assessment? How do they assess that? Like, I know for my aphasia, they give us the WOB, and we've talked about the Western. What is it called? The Western Aphasia Battery.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Look at me. That's because I
Honey,
speak
you know
great.
the stuff, honey. You
I
know the
be I be hanging
stuff.
out with y'all. So, um, other than the WOB, would they? How would they? Would she just be take? Would a person that has PPA just be taking a regular dementia test or Alzheimer's test, or would they be taking the WOB?
So for speech language pathologists specifically, some may give them the Western Aphasia Battery, the WOB, or another test that clinicians may use is the Arizona Battery for Communication Disorders of Dementia. And
I've never heard of it.
so that type of test may help you understand what pieces are still strong from a communication perspective as a whole. Because when we think about any type of neurodegenerative disease or a disease that's going to continue to get worse, you then start to look at compensatory strategies to help the individual be as safe in their environment as they can. So whether it's using Post-it notes or environmental types of safety strategies that may really involve the family more so because of the progressive nature.
Like if for the SLP, how would they modify their treatment plan for a person with aphasia versus a person with PPA? And I understand that it's obviously, you just kind of answered it, I guess, before, because it's progressive versus stagnant.
Right.
So that kind of tells me right there, it would seem like it would be a little different. But are there things that are similar, and or where do they split in the way you would treat?
Yeah, so oftentimes when you think about treating an individual that has aphasia that's not in a progressive nature, the idea and the goal is to try to get that individual back to a level of independence.
Okay.
Where with someone with a progressive type of aphasia, the idea is to get that person to where they're safe, where they're comfortable in that space that they're in, and using strategies. So where, one goal might be, I don't want you to look at this picture. I want you to just, guess or use different strategies to figure out a name of something. With PPA, you're just going to show them whatever picture. You don't want them guessing at anything. I'm just going to tell you whatever I want you to know. So I'm not going to try to make you remember, don't touch the stove or turn off the stove. I'm going to make sure you have a Post-it note that says, don't touch the stove or
unplug it, or just unplug it.
There you go. Exactly.
Right. So they're treated like they have Alzheimer's because they're on the road to Alzheimer's.
Well, we should do an episode on dementia because, Alzheimer's is a different type of dementia. And so when we think about primary progressive aphasia, it doesn't necessarily occur just with dementia. It can occur with any disease that starts to deteriorate the language centers of the brain.
Well, that doesn't sound like a good long-term outlook for a person with PPA. It sounds like that's because it is progressive and it's not stagnant, and it seems like that's just that long-term outlook. Well, what would the long-term medically be? Is there any hope in recovery? I guess there's not. You've already answered that. Sheesh.
Yeah, a lot of times with PPA and the research the research that they're doing. So shout out to all of my PPA researchers. I just did some reviews for the Clinical Aphasiology Conference, and we got a lot of great submissions on primary progressive aphasia. I think the scientists are trying to find new ways to help family members, because unfortunately, a lot of the burden does fall on the family members because of the progressive nature of it. And so trying to understand, okay, well, what words in the individual's vocabulary are important? And so that's one of the major differences too with treatment with a primary progressive aphasia versus maybe just a regular aphasia, in that a regular aphasia, I might just be trying to get you to increase your vocabulary. So, dog, pen, hat, like all these other things.
Right.
But with a primary progressive aphasia, because of the progression of the disease, I need to make sure that the words that I'm training you on are keeping you up to speed with are words that you actually use in your vocabulary.
I understand. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm back on this road that's taking on water and progressive. It's like I'm just taking on water. So I just need to make sure I can stay afloat rather than getting to a better road. It's not about getting to a better road. It's about staying afloat.
Right. So even if you think about family members, going back to what we were talking about treatment, I might not just have a picture of your wife, your spouse. I'm going to have a picture of your spouse with her name, because I don't
Okay.
need you to try to constantly remember, because then that also creates frustration, especially
Yes.
if it's depending on what lobes or where the degenerative nature is occurring in the brain. You know, if I'm calling you Susie, and you keep
Right.
telling me your name is Tabitha, then I might get upset with you, because I'm like,
Right.
no. But if
Mm-hmm.
the name is there with the picture, that extra visual stimuli takes away from me having to figure it out, which is really, really important for individuals with PPA.
I'm going to tell a quick thing. My aunt had dementia with a side of aphasia. She had it with a
So,
she had it with a side of
give me a
aphasia.
little bit of dementia with
Yeah,
a
just
side
a
of
hit,
aphasia.
just a
Aphasia.
hit, just a scoop. And I remember telling my cousin, shout out to Rennie, that I felt like she knew, even though she couldn't answer, but I didn't know what aphasia
Yeah.
was. And I said, well, she knows she's from North Carolina. And he would say, she doesn't know anything. And I'm like, if you ask her if she's from North Carolina or is she from Denver, she's going to give you a different response on the
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I knew that she was in there, even if she wasn't there for long or couldn't progress. I knew. I was like, no, she knows more than she would. You would. Who's this, CT? And this is why I say it's not about what you know; it's about what you can prove you know.
Yeah.
Because if either you can name this is William Jr. or you can't, and we're so like, see, told you she don't know, and
Mm-hmm.
she did know. And let's say a person thought, I think TT has um aphasia, but they're telling me she has full on dementia. Is there a test to be able to differentiate between the two?
Well, so dementia, so you would go see a neuropsychologist. A neuropsychologist are the individuals that would diagnose dementia.
Okay.
And again, the different types of dementia can only, like as far as like your Alzheimer's or whatever, can really only be diagnosed after death, because you have to look and see the plaques and tangles of the brain. So
Mm-hmm.
when we think about aphasia, aphasia is the symptom of something that's happening in the brain. So whether aphasia, now an individual is starting to have difficulty with their words or showing signs of like loss of language,
Mm-hmm.
then that could be a sign to the neuropsychologist that maybe dementia or something else is happening, especially if there wasn't an acute stroke or a brain injury or something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Something that
And
we
then
can
the
point
individual,
to.
there you go. And then the individual just all of a sudden is having trouble naming things.
Mm-hmm.
Another good episode that we might do could be on like a mild cognitive impairment, which is often something that you would hear of is, someone may say, okay,
No,
okay,
no,
okay.
I'm not waving you off. I'm saying me.
Oh,
I'm saying
well,
me.
because there are certain age changes that happen like to our language, meaning sometimes you might say like, oh, I can't remember this word, and
Mm-hmm.
some of that stuff is normal.
Right. I walk in the room. I don't remember why I walked in
There you
there.
go. Some of that stuff is normal with age. That's what we would consider normal aging. But when it becomes the frequency of it, or when it starts to interrupt your activities of daily living, that's when you go to a neuropsychologist and they put you through a battery of assessments to look at your language ability. And then depending on what those results are, then you would go to a speech language pathologist that would start you on a therapy plan and test you more on what exactly the language difficulties you are having.
Dr. Seles, this has really been a great episode. I've learned so much.
Thank you. I hope I explained it well. Thanks so much, Angie. I'm really glad that we were able to talk about this. And I think maybe we should do an episode on dementia and what that looks like, especially with how it intertwines with aphasia and other language difficulties.
All right, listen, we will see you guys later. Thank you guys for listening. Oh, we have our YouTube channel. Be sure to check that out.
Yes. Bye.
Peace, y'all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Brain Friends. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite streaming platform. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Brain Friends, the podcast. I'm so extra.